Welcome to today's TAFE Talks. I'm Teresa Schmidt, Executive Director of Policy and Governance at TAFE Directors Australia. Today's topic is the power of TAFE and industry collaboration to support apprenticeship commencement and completions. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of all the different lands upon which we meet today. I'm coming to you today from Gubbi Gubbi country, and I would like to pay my respects to elders past and present, and to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining us in the discussion today. If you would like to introduce yourself and acknowledge the tradition, If you would like to introduce yourself and acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands that you are on, please feel free to do so in the chat. Wanya, welcome to you all. Apprenticeships play a vital role in addressing the workforce demands in critical industries. In today's session, we will explore how positive partnerships between employers and TAFEs contribute to apprenticeship commencements and completions, and how these partnerships may be strengthened to expand apprenticeship opportunities for the future. Let me begin today by introducing ReadyTech, one of TDA's valued corporate affiliates. ReadyTech is a leading provider of mission-critical service software for the education, employment services, workforce management, government and justice sectors. Joining us from ReadyTech is James Horn, Head of Enterprise, Education and Work Pathways. James is a senior business leader in ReadyTech's education and work pathways business, with over a decade of experience working alongside TAFEs and large public vet providers to maximise the reach, efficiency and impact of student and learning management solutions. As the head of enterprise, James is a strong advocate for best practice, cloud-based software as a service approaches within the TAFE sector, with a particular focus on interoperability across student administration, learning and compliance systems. A trusted advisor and relationship builder, James believes in forming long-term partnerships that support the evolving needs of TAFEs, public providers and the broader vocational education ecosystem. Let's hear from James from ReadyTech before I introduce you to today's panel.
Thanks, Teresa. That was uncomfortable to sit through, but I appreciate you adding that context. And I will start by thanking Teresa and the TDA team for pulling today's session together. It's a really important discussion and one that's probably been had across the sector now for many years. But over the last 12 months, it's probably become more and more highlighted the importance to try and solve this. And the reason why I was really excited to participate about a topic like collaboration is we're often talking about that in streams of both the individuals and the entities involved, whether it be TAFE-industry, the individual themselves. But those problems that exist within there, and we're going to hear from Caroline and Suzi and Andrew about how they're demonstrating solutions in real life. One of the core contributors to solving that will be the technology layer. And Teresa, you've already given a fairly comprehensive overview of ReadyTech, but I might just dig a little deeper into that. We've worked across the apprenticeship market specifically for the last 21 years. And across our technology ecosystem, we have a very privileged and unique viewpoint from how we can start to break down some of those silos that exist in the apprenticeship space. And when we think about how true collaboration can exist, it's really important that each of the contributors to that experience are seeing the same thing, whether it be the apprentice, the employer, or the TAFE, and having that one connected collaboration junction. And that's where the ReadyTech technology has been able to support the TAFE market in particular for the last 20 years. So if anyone wants to reach out and have a broader conversation about that, I'm happy to pick up those conversations. But again, we're really proud to be partnering with TDA, and thank you for the opportunity to talk today.
Thanks, James, and thanks ReadyTech for assisting with today's presentation. So let me introduce our panel for today's event. Our first panellist is Andrew Widdis, Executive Director for Defence and the Defence Industry Skills Centre of Excellence at South Metropolitan TAFE, Western Australia. Andrew is a nationally recognised leader in defence training, workforce development and digital learning innovation. With over 20 years' experience in the defence education sector, Andrew has played a pivotal role in advancing Australia's sovereign training capabilities through the development of cutting-edge simulation technologies and skills-based training solutions. In his current role, Andrew leads national initiatives to address critical workforce shortages, strengthen sovereign capability, and build industry-aligned training pipelines. His work continues to shape the next generation of skilled professionals critical to Australia's national defence capability, and we'll hear a little more about that today. Following Andrew's presentation, we'll hear from Suzi Hewlett, Strategic Advisor, Manufacturing Industry Skills Alliance. Suzi has both international and national experience in education reform agendas in a range of positions within government, non-government organisations, private sector and in tertiary education, including the University of South Pacific and Solomon Islands College of Higher Education. She brings a strong background in skills policy with senior executive roles in the Commonwealth Public Service. Suzi's notable achievements include establishing and managing the Office for Learning and Teaching and implementing reforms to the national training system to strengthen industry engagement. And we look forward to hearing about some of Suzi's insights today into strengthening industry engagement. And finally, we will hear from Dr. Caroline Smith, Executive Director of the Australian Industry Group's Centre for Education and Training. We know the Australian Industry Group as AIG. As a senior leader specialising in future skills, employment and economic policy, Caroline has had a distinguished career dedicated to empowering individuals and businesses. Her focus includes economic and skills development, labour markets, workforce planning and the future of work. With extensive expertise in federal and state government and peak bodies, Caroline brings strategic insights on workforce development policy and innovation. Caroline's experience includes being the inaugural Executive Director of Jobs Queensland, Deputy Chief Executive of the National Employment Services Association, and Executive Director, Economic and Policy Futures in Queensland Government. Now, before I hand over to Andrew, who will kick us off, I wanted to let you know that today's session is being recorded and the recording will be made available to everyone who registered for this TAFE-talks session and on the TDA website. Closed captioning is also available for this event. If you have any questions that you'd like to pose to our speakers today, please use the Q&A box throughout the session and we will come back to those at the end. You can use the chat for discussion with each other throughout the session, but we won't be able to monitor that chat for questions, so please use the Q&A function. You're a big audience today, so it's going to be really important to put your questions in that Q&A, and I look forward to seeing those. So it now gives me great pleasure to hand over to Andrew Widdis from the Defence Industry Skills Centre of Excellence, South Metropolitan TAFE, to kick off today's discussion. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Teresa, and hello everyone. Thanks for joining me today. As stated, and I'll state it again because it's written down in my script, my name is Andrew Widdis and I am the Executive Director of the Defence Industry Skills Centre of Excellence, led by South Metropolitan TAFE. Today, I'll share my perspective on the role of partnerships and in particular, how strong collaboration between industry, government and the vocational education and training sector can improve access to apprenticeships and create clearer and more equitable pathways into skilled careers. Across the vocational education training sector, we are delivering high quality, highly valued training. National data shows that almost 90% of vocational education training qualification completers are satisfied with their training and more than 87% achieve their primary reason for enrolling. However, this does not consistently translate into confident transitions into apprenticeships or employment. In 2024, only 64% of vocational education training qualification completers improved their employment status after training, and fewer than 1/3 were employed in the same occupation as their qualification. These results highlight that while training quality is strong, a persistent gap remains between training completion and clear aligned pathways into apprenticeships and ongoing work. Today, I want to talk about partnerships, not as a policy concept, but as a practical mechanism for improving apprenticeships outcome. In particular, how deliberate collaboration between TAFEs, employers, and supporting organisations can increase both commencements and completions. I will draw on two programs as examples: the Defence Industry Pathways Program and a School-Based Traineeship pilot. While these sit within the defence context, the lessons are highly transferable across trades and industries. The core message is simple: when training is designed with industry and connected early to real workplaces, apprenticeship pathways become clearer, stronger, and more achievable. From a vocational education training perspective, the apprenticeship challenge is rarely about learner motivation or employer intent. It is more often about connection. Employers are telling us they need people who are job ready, who understand workplace expectations, and can transition smoothly into apprenticeships. Learners, on the other hand, are looking for certainty. They want to know that their training leads somewhere tangible, not just to another qualification, but to a real job. Traditional models where training and employment sit apart can struggle to bridge this gap. What we see consistently is that apprenticeship outcomes improve when employers are involved early, when workplace exposure is structured, and when learners are supported across the full journey. This requires TAFEs to move beyond delivery alone and into genuine partnerships. One practical example of this partnership-led approach is the Defence Industry Pathways Program. This is a structured traineeship program designed to improve access to defence industry careers by sharing responsibility across the system. Industry, TAFE, and a group training organisation each play a clearly defined role, rather than placing the burden on any single part of the system. The program delivers a nationally recognised Certificate 3 aligned to defence industry, with a primary focus on the maritime component of the sector. The qualification is designed to build both foundational employment and technical capability. Training typically includes work health and safety, basic engineering and manufacturing skills, measurement and hand tools, teamwork, communication, and digital workplace skills. These are the core entry-level capabilities that employers consistently tell us they require. Industry partners identify the skills and behaviours needed in the workplace. TAFE delivers applied, contextualised training directly aligned to those expectations. The group training organisation provides continuity, pastoral support, and coordination of placements. Importantly, learners are embedded in real workplaces early through structured rotations. This allows participants to build confidence, understand workplace expectations, and develop relationships with supervisors and teams well before any recruitment decisions are made. What this program demonstrates is that pathways are stronger when employers help shape training and when learners are visible, supported, and genuinely work ready before they apply for an apprenticeship. The outcome is not just better preparation, but a smoother and more informed transition into employment, including apprenticeships for both learners and employers. To illustrate outcomes, the Defence Industry Pathways Program is delivering notable results in terms of apprenticeship transitions. Although it is important to be clear that the program was not designed to directly produce apprenticeships. Across the 2022 and 2026 intakes, the program has supported 323 trainees to date. Of these, 31 participants have commenced apprenticeships immediately following completion of the program. These outcomes span several trades aligned to defence workforce demands. The significance of this outcome lies in the specific trades and more in the mechanism that enables these transitions. Early workplace exposure, structured rotations, and shared responsibility across industry, TAFE, and group training organisations create clearer signals for both learners and employers. This allows apprenticeships offers to emerge as natural consequences of capability, fit, and confidence rather than as a forced or artificial target. In this context, apprenticeship commencement should be viewed as a byproduct of a well-designed pathway, not the sole measure of success. The program's real value is in reducing uncertainty, improving readiness, and enabling smoother transitions into employment across the defence industry. The same partnership principle that underpins the Defence Industry Pathways program also applies when we look at a school-based pathways. The School Based Traineeship pilot, developed as a Defence Industry Skills Centre of Excellence initiative, extends the Defence Industry Pathways program model into Year 11 and Year 12, allowing students to commence the Defence Industry Pathways Certificate 3 while completing their senior secondary studies. It uses the same core fundamentals, shared responsibility, industry-informed training, and early workplace exposure, but it is deliberately designed to serve the broader defence industry, rather than being limited to a single subsector such as maritime. Students combine school-based learning with vocational education and training delivered by TAFE, alongside structured and supported workplace exposure. This creates a gradual, low-risk entry point into defence industry careers, at a stage when young people are still forming their career aspirations. From a vocational education perspective, this early engagement is critical. It allows students to experience defence workplaces in a supported environment, build foundational employability and technical skills, and develop a realistic understanding of what different defence roles involve. Importantly, it also allows employers to engage earlier with potential future apprentices. Rather than relying on interviews alone, employers can observe capability, attitude, and fit over time. This reduces uncertainty for both learners and employers and supports more confidence apprenticeship decisions later. While this pilot sits within the defence industry context, the lesson is broadly applicable, starting earlier, aligning training to real-world workforce needs, and coordinating effort across schools, TAFEs, and employers makes apprenticeship pathways clearer, more accessible, and more sustainable. Across both programs, the conversion from training into apprenticeships does not rely on a single intervention, it relies on design. Firstly, co-design matters. When employers see their input reflected in training, confidence increases. Secondly, structured workplace experience matters. Learners who spend time in real workplaces understand expectations, culture, and standards well before recruitment decisions. And thirdly, coordination matters. Schools, TAFEs, jobs and skills centres, and employers each play a role in supporting the learners to play engaged and progress. Finally, governance matters. Ongoing review and feedback ensure training stays relevant and trusted. For the vet sector, the key insight is that apprenticeship outcomes improve when partnerships are intentional, structured, and sustained. The strong evidence for partnership-led models is not just in numbers, but in confidence. Learners move into workplaces already familiar with expectations. Employers recruit people they already know and trust, and TAFEs see stronger completion and clearer pathways into employment. While apprenticeships are ultimately offered by employers, the role of the vet sector is to design training that employers recognise, value, and want to invest in. The key takeaway for me is this: partnerships are not an optional extra. They are the pathway that connects training to apprenticeships. Thank you so much. And now I'd like to hand to Suzi to take on.
Many thanks, Andrew, and I'm just organising to share my screen. Here we go. Is that all right for everyone?
That's great.
Yeah, it's all good. Thank you. Andrew, great presentation. I must say there's nothing in there that I didn't agree with. So looking forward to talking to you more in the future. Good afternoon, everyone, and again, a big thank you to Teresa and the TDA team for having me here today. The MESA developed the Better Manufacturing Apprenticeships Outcomes project to address growing concerns about manufacturing apprenticeship and traineeship completion rates, and the fact that we also didn't have granular data about particular subsectors, and we wanted to get a better understanding of that. The project investigated behavioural drivers of non-completion, established a stronger data baseline for employers, training organisations and the skills system more broadly, and identified trends to inform targeted interventions that reduce cancellations, and strengthen the manufacturing workforce pipeline. So we worked with NCVR to analyse the student outcome survey data from 21 to 24, and also looked at the individual completion rates for apprentices and trainees from 2015 to 2019. Alongside the data analysis, we also undertook an extensive consultation process across government, apprentices, training organisations, industry peak bodies, employers, and unions. Using this improved custom methodology from NCVR, which tracked the apprentices, individual apprentices, rather than contracts, which we've done up until recently, we found that manufacturing apprentices who commenced in 2019 achieved a 60% national completion rate based on nearly 12,000 apprentices, compared with the previously cited NCVR figure of 54%. And in fact, in many instances, it's actually been lower than that over the years. And you can see from that slide there are real differences across the training packages that the Manufacturing Industry Skills Alliance is responsible for. And I think if you look at that slide, those two blue lines at the bottom in aerospace and chemical hydrocarbons and refining, we've got completion rates that are 76% and 79%. So what we're taking from that is where there's a very clear pathway into employment and a particular occupation, people are more likely to complete. But this approach of tracking individuals rather than contracts gives us a much better picture of where an apprentice goes from 1 to 2 to 3 employers and whether they complete their qualification or not. Just very quickly over the next 2 slides, and I know that I've given them to TDA so people can access them, and because some of these lines are very hard to read, I do acknowledge. But one of the things that we found that was interesting, that actually apprentices in regional areas have higher completion rates than those in major cities. So that's a 65% versus a 57% for the 2019 cohort, indicating that location can play a really significant role in those outcomes. So perhaps the stronger community ties, clear expectations of manufacturing work, family members and local industry connections certainly appear to offset any access or constraints surrounding access to training. So we thought that was very interesting. And then again, very quickly, we looked at completion rates across a number of priority cohorts, which all tended to be lower than the national average. And you've got an overview of that there. Findings show that completion outcomes vary significantly across those cohorts, and it really does underscore the need for targeted cohort-specific supports rather than a one-size-fits-all approach to improving apprenticeship outcomes for those particular groups. On-the-job factors were cited as most common reasons for non-completions. Stakeholder consultations uncovered deeper drivers of non-completion. So apprentices often cited on-the-job factors such as poor supervision and lack of support, repetitive or unfulfilling tasks, unsafe or a lack of inclusive work environment, low wages, unclear career pathways, and unrealistic job expectations. And I think that goes to Andrew's point about the importance of pre-apprenticeships and taster programs in setting more realistic expectations about a particular industry sector. Other challenges included poor literacy and numeracy, and I'll be really interested in your educators' perspectives on that. Limited access to training in remote areas and a mismatch between training content and the skills actually needed in the workplace were often cited as challenges, which could lead apprentices to seek employment opportunities, other opportunities with other employers, or potentially withdraw from their training altogether. Training, we found, was not a driver of non-completion, but it can amplify other concerns. The key training related issues that were cited, particularly by apprentices, included teacher quality and access training, particularly in remote regions. In addition, outdated training equipment and a mismatch between what was being taught in off-the-job training versus on-the-job training was a challenge for apprentices. And I need to make the point here that it wasn't all one way. Sometimes a TAFE provider had really state-of-the-art equipment, and then the apprentice was going back to a workplace where they were working on outdated equipment. So I think that really highlights, and again, Andrew's point, there needs to be very robust conversations between employers and training providers to make sure that the differences in what's being taught off the job and what people are experiencing on the job is very clear. I think it would be fair to say that apprentices shared very positive experiences with us, highlighting that supported, knowledgeable teachers, and often talked about the value of their peer cohort in class and having that opportunity to share their learnings with other apprentices. But certainly understaffing and turnover were issues that were mentioned by a number of the apprentices. And the impact that had on the students was that it reduced the one-on-one time with teachers. It reduced their access to individual support and feedback. And also there might be gaps or repetition in content if there were frequent teacher changes. Apprentices consistently emphasise the importance of trainers having up-to-date industry knowledge. Stakeholders also raised concerns about an ageing trainer workforce, skills currency gaps, and the persistent shortages of qualified educators. These issues are compounded by difficulties attracting and retaining trainers who are often drawn back into higher paid industry jobs. Government and education stakeholders highlighted the need for urgent investment in teacher recruitment, retention, and professional development. And I think trainer shortages, particularly in those regional and rural areas, are having material impacts, with some education providers reporting delays of up to 8 months before apprentices can commence their training. I've talked about the relevance of training machinery, so I might skip over that slide in the interest of time and not stealing moments from Caroline. Again, I can't emphasize enough really the clear understanding of work expectations and industry is central to good apprenticeship outcomes. So that relationship between employers and between their local training providers came up constantly. And there were instances where we found that certain TAFEs were sending their trainers into the workplace to do the training, particularly when an employer had a cohort, a substantial cohort, which meant that the on-the-job supervisors could hear what was being taught and could then reinforce that through their on-the-job training. And again, it really emphasising the importance of employers and RTOs engaging in those taster and pre-apprenticeship programs. Apprentices with prior exposure to manufacturing and a clear understanding of the job demands, the career pathways and skill requirements, including literacy and numeracy, are far more likely to persist. I know that I'm running out of time, so I think I've raised the issue about LLN. Also the importance of support systems. I think just before I finish up, a lot of people did talk about flexible and accessible training options. Certainly the face-to-face training really suited some apprentices, but for others, the opportunity to do blended learning and have some of their units taught online was really valuable, particularly for apprentices who need to travel long distances. And that nutty old chestnut about recognition of prior learning and competency-based progression, this was particularly raised by some of our mature age apprentices who reported frustration when their prior experience wasn't recognised. And so very briefly here, here's our recommendations that MISA is now working on. I think that the supervisor training is something that came up. We talked about, we're looking at contextualising the workplace supervisor skill set in the TAE at the moment, specifically for the manufacturing sector. There was a lot of chat about exploring dual and higher degree apprenticeships to meet evolving industry needs as well. But we'll keep working on that. But I'm now going to finish up there. Thank you for bearing with me and hand over to Caroline.
Thanks very much for that, Suzi, and it's great to be here, everyone. And I think this is an important discussion, and I think that understanding the different perspectives of different stakeholders, different parts of the apprenticeship and traineeship system is a really important part of building relationships, which is really important for the partnerships that we've been talking about so far today. So I'm going to really focus on the employer perspective and talk about some research that Australian Industry Group Centre for Education and Training did last year. And there we go. So last year, sorry, has that disappeared? I've taken that away from my...
No, it's good.
No, it's still there. Okay. So last year we undertook some research at the Australian Industry Group Centre for Education and Training that was looking at the employer perspective. And so to do that, we engaged with hundreds of employers of apprentices and trainees across the country. In doing that, we had a mix of industry sectors. So we had the strongest representation from manufacturing, just over 40%, 28% construction, and followed by services, which was 22%. And we had a bit of a mix of size of organisations as well as part of that. Is the different slides showing, or am I still on the first screen? Because what it's showing for me is I'm just on the first screen.
Yeah, it's still on the first screen, Caroline. See if you can move it through.
All right, just give me a moment and I'll see if I can
Might be
get
stuck.
it. Yeah, it's stuck. I might stop sharing for a moment and I'll reshare, and I think that might be the quickest way to do that, hopefully. Okay.
That's it.
Go.
All working. Yes, that's great.
Lovely. Thank you. So I've just really spoken to this slide about the survey. So to talk to the key insights and findings of the survey, put simply, employers value apprentices and trainees and the apprenticeship and traineeship system. 8 in 10 identified that apprentices and trainees are important or very important to their business. So, But our research also found that the system's not currently producing sufficient numbers. When you look at all the different types of areas of demand, we're just not looking to be matching supply with demand. The research also found that the cost and complexity of apprenticeships and traineeships are going up for businesses, but at the same time, employer satisfaction is going down. So the context for the research was the strategic review of Australian apprentice incentives. So we did have some questions in there about incentives and the costs involved to employers. So I'll talk a little bit about that before talking about some of the broader aspects. Around half of the employers that were surveyed said that they would reduce their employment of apprentices or trainees if they no longer received incentives. And it's important that to note that every decision to employ an apprentice or a trainee is a business decision for a company. And so financial incentives, we found through the research, they don't solely drive decision making, but they do represent an important part of the overall economic equation that employers consider when they're making those decisions. We also found through the research that almost all, so 96% of the employers that we surveyed face barriers of some sort when hiring apprentices or trainees. So the most commonly reported barrier was the difficulty in finding suitable candidates. They also identified the burden of supervision and training as being a barrier, navigating fragmented regulatory systems, impacts of non-completions, and uncertain business conditions were also issues that they found. And so I'll talk a little bit about some of the other, barriers or reasons for dissatisfaction from an employer perspective in a moment using NCEVA data. But I think, one of our really key conclusions is that to grow apprenticeships and traineeships, the focus needs to be on ensuring that the system is viable for new employers and for existing employers to be able to maximise the apprenticeships and traineeship offerings that they have. It's not the only thing that's important for the system, but it was certainly one of the key findings that we had. So the slide that I should have up there now is NCEVA data, and I think it's another element of the discussion around the employer experience. So I wanted to share this with you to highlight the top 5 reasons for dissatisfaction from employers. So it was around the relevance of skills being taught. So that was the biggest issue at almost 55%. Training of being of a poor quality or low standard, that was almost 50%, 49.9%. Insufficient communication between the training provider and employment agency, around about a third reported that. Training is too general and not specific enough. Just over 31% identified that as a reason for dissatisfaction, and then not enough focus on practical skills. That was reported by 25%. So in looking at the data that we found through our survey and some of the other sources of data that we used through the research that we did, like the NCVR data, we identified 10 recommendations in 6 priority areas. And I'll go over all of those briefly, but I am going to focus particularly on supporting high quality apprenticeship and traineeship experiences in a moment. But to briefly cover all of the 6 areas. So one was maintaining a viable economic equation for employers. And so That's really highlighting the importance of the policy settings, including but not exclusively incentive settings. Secondly, the importance of widening the pool of employers that are offering apprenticeships and traineeships, and some strategies for doing that we identified as being enabling access to group training organisations, and also supporting large employers to train in their supply chains. Another area that we identified as being really important was to be ensuring a strong future pipeline of apprentices and trainees. And so that's partly about lifting the status of the system and I guess awareness of apprenticeship and traineeship pathways for school leavers, but also, and we've talked about this already in the discussion, the importance of pre-apprenticeships, so that understanding and expectation management is part of built strongly into the system. Extending apprenticeships into higher level qualifications was another area that we talked about, and almost half of the employers surveyed expressed interest in degree and higher level apprenticeships. And so removing barriers to and supporting the increased uptake of high level and degree apprenticeships was another important area in our work. Simplifying the system across jurisdictions. One of the things that we really commonly hear from our members is how the complexity of the system, both in and of itself with all of the different actors and players, it means it's complex, but particularly for those employers that are operating across state boundaries, it's a even more complex situation. So we think that it's really important to reduce the regulatory complexity and consistencies across states and territories to be able to improve the system. And then finally, definitely last but not least, supporting high quality apprenticeship and traineeship experiences by building workplace supervision capability and also enabling quality and timely off-the-job training. So I will talk about that last one a little bit more. And so the three sort of key areas as part of that recommendation were the importance of high quality workplace supervision to support the on-the-job learning and a positive workplace experiences relevant to the occupation. We identified apprentice supervisor training for supervisors being a really important element of that, and that's something we talk about in the report. Improved recruitment and matching of apprentices and trainees with industries, occupations and employers. So I've already talked about pre-apprenticeships, school-based apprenticeships and effective recruitment processes, including supports for particularly small to medium-sized businesses in terms of their recruitment expertise. Also, quality and timely off-the-job training for apprentices and trainees that's aligned to employer needs. For example, training plans would ideally be genuinely negotiated, not a one-size-fits-all approach. We think that would make an important difference. So, and I think, absolutely central is the importance of strong and effective partnerships between TAFE and employers. And so some of the specific areas that we've identified there. So the importance of timely and geographically accessible off-the-job training that minimises operational disruption for employers. We know that this can particularly be an issue outside of metro areas, but we've also heard, just for example, employers in areas of Melbourne who, they're to be able to get the access to the courses that are needed. They're needing for their apprentices to travel a fair way to be able to do that. So being able to match that. As best as possible, the geographical location is really, really important. Timeliness is important too. We do hear sometimes that there's a long wait time for the apprentices to actually be able to start their off-the-job training, and being able to get that as closer alignment as possible. And that sort of goes to the second point, the coordination and sequencing of on and off-the-job training components, so that there is a good alignment there between those different components of the experience. The importance of aligning training to current industry practices, also really an important element, so that the employer can be assured that the training is is definitely in line with industry need and contemporary need. Skilled and experienced trainers, that also definitely makes a big difference. As well, we've already talked a little about recognition of prior learning, but the proactive use of recognition of prior learning, particularly for more mature apprentices, can be a really important component. And clear communication with employers on matters relating to competency-based wage progression, and I guess sort of employer being comfortable with the sign-off process as well is really important. Underpinning all of this, we acknowledge that these successful partnerships need to be underpinned by system and funding settings that enable RTOs to deliver high quality and off-the-job training experiences for employers and apprentices and trainees alike. We acknowledge just the importance of that aspect as well. So that's all. With that, I able to hand back to Teresa.
Thanks, Caroline. Yep, you've got some links there for further information or contacts, so we'll send those out with the recording. Some great presentations there, and we have got some very interesting questions in the chat, so in the Q&A box. So I'm going to ask these questions some of them I might combine together. So listen carefully if you're waiting for your question to be answered. A quick one for Andrew. Oh, I don't know if it's a quick one, actually. I think, Andrew, thinking about the partnership model, and this might also lead into another question about pre-apprenticeships, but there's some interest in how the partnership model in Defence has been funded, and also thinking about this, and this might be a question that we might get everybody to touch on, the importance of pre-apprenticeship programs and how we might be able to extend the Defence model more widely, or how we might be able to expand those pre-apprenticeship program opportunities. But firstly, I think, Andrew, let's hear about how your partnership model is funded.
Thank you. Yes, so we're very fortunate to be part of what is essentially a critical industry, Defence Industries. So primarily the funding is from a Commonwealth perspective, that is the Defence Industry Pathways program, and predominantly Defence themselves. They identified quite some time ago that maritime industry do require a pipeline of workers. And that is extended then to when we stood up the Defence Industry Skills Centre of Excellence, further funding around that to look at even earlier. So before we, instead of school leavers, let's go a step further back and look at VETs in schools and start to deliberately engage with students and prepare them for Defence Industries. So the funding is Commonwealth. The reasoning why it comes from there is because it's identified as a critical industry, which helps in that factor. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. So in that, thinking about the pre-apprenticeship model, I guess what we might do is have a conversation with everyone now about some thoughts on how that might be expanded. So I'll start with you, Andrew, in case you've got any ideas.
Yeah. So pre-apprenticeship is not totally new. It is sometimes, it exists, and it's designed and developed for particular often trades or qualifications. In our instance, when we were looking at the Defence Industry Pathways program, it was developed for an industry, which is an interesting approach. Instead of just looking at pre-apps for qualifications or occupations, we were looking at populating an industry with a generalist so that industry could then take them up and put them on their career path. That's the it's a little bit of a strange departure from your normal pre-app, but still servicing an industry. It's turned out to be very powerful as a pre-app model.
Thanks, Andrew. Suzi, any thoughts on that, on the pre-apprenticeship models from your perspective?
Thanks, Teresa. In our research, we uncovered many different types of pre-apprenticeship type of programs that went from sort of TAFEs to school-based apprenticeships, to sort of familiarisation programs for people that had left school, early school leavers. And I think one of the things that I was quite surprised about was that there was no preferred model for employers. It was often quite locally based and something that worked well within their particular region. In terms of funding, there seemed to be a wide range of ways of accessing funding. Andrew was saying there's money from the Commonwealth, but a lot of states and territories are also, a lot of jurisdictions are putting money into those programs as well, and getting that in-kind support from employers along the way. So I think, we found many good examples. None of them seem to work better than others, but certainly those that had that local engagement were really had the good success rates.
Thanks, Suzi. So it sounds like it is coming back down to those strong partnerships and kind of bespoke models depending on the industry and environment. Any insights from your perspective, Caroline?
Yeah, look, and certainly agree there are a lot of different models out there. One approach that we think is good is a bit of a taster approach, so that there could be exposure to different industries. Some occupations sort of get more are more known or get more exposure than others, and so an approach that gives a little bit of a taste of a range of different options is really something that we think can open up the eyes of young people into getting a sense of that real world experience and what really kind of piques their interest.
Thanks, Caroline. Okay, well, I'm going to stay with you for a moment and ask, so we've had a question about the employers' reasons for wanting more support for uptake of degree level apprenticeships. So why do they feel that support's needed, and the barriers, and was it more relevant in some sectors than others?
Thanks for that. If we think about what's happening with our labour market, overall we're seeing higher level skill needs sort of across the board. If you look at the patterns that have happened in recent years, and if you look at projections of Jobs and Skills Australia, sort of overall it's we're seeing a trajectory of higher level skills, and alongside that, there's a real value in the work-based training approaches that apprenticeships and traineeships offer. And some research that we've done shows that for people who are aged 25, if they've followed an apprenticeship and traineeship pathway, by age 25 they're higher paid and happier in their work than just about any other group, other than those with a postgraduate qualification. So it's a really beneficial model, and it means as well from an employer perspective that people are getting to be more productive over time because of the work-based context in which they've been training. So we really think that for those reasons, there's a really important need to be offering those sort of work-based experience through degree and high-level apprenticeships and traineeships. So in the survey that we did, 46% of the employers that responded said that they would be interested in those kinds of models, which I think, yes, it's less than 50%, but it's based on a model that isn't really widely available at the moment. So I actually think that that is a strong support for those kinds of models. We don't think that it's needed in every industry or occupation. We think that really it comes down to what is the need, and starting with the job first, and starting with the employer need. And we think that it's important to to work with employers to understand their need and to be able to sort of harness that demand and facilitate that demand with employers. So it's not something that there's certainly barriers in establishing that kind of thing. Some of the barriers are the likes of, and we talk about this quite a bit, but fringe benefits tax is a big barrier. Effectively, if an employer is going to be paying for and particularly the types of models where there's a university degree, because there's a whole range of different models that have either been tested or efforts to developing, but those that involve a university degree, those are quite expensive. Some of the ones we've been involved in, sort of a cost of $35,000, but with fringe benefits tax, it's effectively doubling the cost to employers. So that's a huge disincentive, and definitely one of the things that we think is really important to be looked at, so that the system can continue to evolve to reflect that changing labour market that I talked about.
Thanks, Caroline. That's really interesting, and it might be a perspective that we hadn't thought of yet. We've covered the range today, from pre-apprenticeships to even these emerging degree high apprenticeships. So very interesting conversation. I think we've got a little bit of time left to go back to put Andrew back on the spotlight again. No pressure, Andrew. Ronald's asked if you can touch on any evaluation outcomes for your program.
Yeah, so as you've been, part of that broader partnership, TAFE component have their traditional and standard evaluation models as they deliver the units for the programs. They evaluate in accordance, as they always do. When we go beyond that, when we see students placed in work placement, and that's really that partnership and coordination with the GTOs, and to make sure that we're overseeing and assisting that. And then we collate and collect it all together and I'm talking about the Defence Industry Pathways program. We collect and collate that and then provide that to the Commonwealth so they can oversee those evaluations and report on its progress. When we're looking at the student-based traineeship, it's a similar, but again, it's dependent on partnerships. We need the vet environment to be able to really work hand in hand with the high schools and the secondary colleges that we work with, and make sure that we have capture our evaluations as we normally again would in the TAFE sector and the vet sector. But even beyond that, how do we capture the extended evaluations of the students enjoying their time, and are they accomplishing outcomes? So yeah, we capture that through surveys and through our traditional evaluation techniques.
Thanks, Andrew. Yes, there's a lot to consider when we're thinking about evaluation, isn't there? And sometimes it's at the outcomes, sometimes it's more broad, and also that longitudinal look might be important down the track. Some really interesting discussions today. We're just about at the close, and I know that there's probably a few questions that we didn't get answered, but it's certainly, I think we've raised the importance and some of these, I guess, wicked problems that we've had in apprenticeships for some time, but you can certainly see some patterns and themes emerging from the research that's been reported on today and some of the experiences that Andrew's spoken about with the work of the Centre of Excellence. So we're looking forward to some future success with some of these models being, you know, piloted and expanded. But look, I think it's time to say a really big thank you to our panelists, and particularly also we need to thank again ReadyTech, who helped support this presentation today and support many of you in your software as a service needs. So thank you, ReadyTech and James. Thank you to our wonderful presenters, Andrew, Suzi and Caroline. And thank you to the audience, because your participation really makes it. The questions were fantastic. I hope you found the session interesting. Our next event is in the chat. It's the Power of TAFE and Internationally Networked Centres of Vocational Excellence, featuring Budavine Gravink. You don't want to miss that. 29th of April, 5 p.m. Thank you. See you there.